Stay hungry, stay foolish.
So now on the Innovation Show, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Pam Grout, New York Times best-selling author of E Squared, amidst many, many other books. Welcome to the show, Pam.
Hey, I am so honored to be here. I love talking to someone with an accent, so this is really fun for me.
And likewise, you have an
Yeah.
accent to me as well. We were talking off air about 19 books. Art and Soul Reloaded is the latest one, which is really about innovation and mindset. But the dominant theme throughout all your work is this idea of, do you live in a problem state of mind or do you live in a possibility state? And I'd love, before we even go there, Pam, to hear your own story, because it's a fascinating one.
So I grew up in the Midwest of the United States, and I grew up in a small town, and I always knew I wanted more, than what I had. I mean, I always knew I wanted to go places, see things, I wanted to travel. So I started getting into, a lot of, spiritual development, metaphysical things. And I came to realize that once you get out of problem state, because the state of the world is that people live in problem state. We think of, all these things we want to fix, and we come up with 7 steps to fix them. But when you get into possibility state, then you realize that really anything is possible, and you look at everything that happens to you as in what could be possible here. So it just changes your mindset and how you're looking at things. I'm, someone, it's become a, best-selling author, and it's, because I've been open to possibility state. And I always go towards that thing that makes me come most alive. And I think when you get into possibility state, that's what ends up happening. I love to write. I love expressing myself through the written word. So I've always pursued that. And then by doing that, I've been able to, do travel writing, which means I get to travel all over the world and see all kinds of things and then write about it. So really whatever I get interested in as a writer, I get to get an assignment to write about, say, a person I want to meet, or a topic that interests me. And then I get an assignment and then I write about it. And then, here's a story about E Squared that's kind of cool. It came out in 2013, in January of 2013. And so on New Year's Eve of 2012, I took a big stick. I was visiting my sister, and she lives in Savannah, Georgia, which is near a beach. And so we went out to the beach to watch to watch the fireworks for the New Year celebration. And so I took a big stick and I wrote in the sand, E Squared, which, is coming out in a month, will be an international bestseller. And then I wrote it in these big letters in the sand with a stick. And then, of course, I let the waves come in, take that message out into the world. And then, of course, the book did go on to become this big international bestseller. It's been translated into 40 languages, and it's just been, a remarkable success story. So I don't know if that's the story you want me to tell, or I'm not quite sure which.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of stories.
You nailed it. What I found reading E Squared was, I did the experiments, and maybe we'll touch on some of the experiments to give a bit of context. Now, I highly recommend anybody listening buy the book. It's a fantastic read. It's peppered with humor and real life experience and stories such as the one you've told us, but also stories from the many people who have had miracles happen in their lives as a result of reading it. Just for context for our audience, Pam gives an experiment essentially per chapter where the reader has to then try these out. But one I thought, Pam, was you asked the universe or God, or you called the person the dude after the Big Lebowski, which I love, and you ask that question, a big burning question that you want answered, and you give an example of that yourself with your own career.
Oh, right. Yes. I was sending out all these query letters. Yeah, this is kind of a fun story. And I was, freelancing on the side. I had a regular job. I was freelancing on the side. And I thought, I would really like to just be a freelance writer and only write what I wanted to write. Because at the time I was writing fundraising letters. So I was writing, it was interesting work, but it was not exactly what I wanted to do. So I said, hey, dude, I'm going to give you this time frame, and I want you to give me a really clear answer, because I believe, and that's one of the hypotheses in the book, is that if you ask for clear guidance and if you expect to get it, you will get clear guidance. But in my case, I asked, is Is it time for me to go out and become a freelance writer? And then the next day I go into my boss and I ended up getting fired. So that was like pretty clear guidance. I think that might be the story that you're talking about.
Absolutely, but and
Okay,
then
okay.
yeah, and then you talk obviously about, you call it the Volkswagen Jetta principle, where you ask for something to manifest, and sometimes we're so closed minded, like you talked about, we're living in a problem state that we don't see it appearing right before our eyes.
Exactly. I mean, I get story after story of that. One of the things that's really different, I think, about this book, these principles, so to speak, have been out there for a long time. Like you mentioned a couple books that you had read, Think and Grow Rich, the Abraham Hicks work. But what I've done in this book, and I think why it became such a smash hit, is I didn't say to anybody, you need to believe this. I said, this is my theory. Here's an experiment to give it a try. And so I set it up with lab report sheets, and it's literally using the scientific method. And most of the experiments are about 48 hours. And so people can try it for themselves. So if you are asked to believe something, well, sure, fine, you might believe it, you might not. But if you see it with your own two eyes, then your confidence in that principle will grow. So what I did in the book, it's nothing new. It's nothing we haven't heard before. I mean, starting back from, I think in the Bible it says, ask and ye shall be given, something like that. But this is like, is this really true? It's time to actually put this into practice. So I set it up, like I said, just like using the scientific method. And so, I give people lab report sheets. They put in the hypotheses. In each of the 9 principles, there is a hypothesis saying, there really is this force out there that wants to interact with you. I think that's the first one, the dude abides, like you mentioned, that I took off from the Big Lebowski. And so each one of them has a principle that I think is really important to know that can really make your life work better. It can make your it just can bring a lot of joy and happiness into your life if you know about these principles. And rather than take my word for it, I'm like, give it a try. That's all I ask. And so I set up the framework for people to try it out. And like I was telling you before we actually started this call, is the most rewarding thing about this book is that I get emails every day from people all over the world that have done these experiments and these amazing, miraculous things that have happened for them. So it's just been really, really fun. In fact, the book that I wrote, follow up, E-Cubed, that I was telling you about, I have a chapter in there called Well, Duh. And it's all about, some of the stories that people sent to me that happened to them after they were doing the experiment. So anyway, it's just been such a great blessing for me to have this book and to, know these principles and to encourage people to, give it a try themselves.
And people need to be open to this. We talked about this as well before we came on air, is so many people live with a veil in front of how they see the world. And there's a great quote that you have by Kurt Anderson in E Squared, which is, everything we think we're seeing is all just a guess, a prediction our brains are making. I love that, because we're adding up all the old paradigms that we are born into, and maybe our fathers and mothers have had before us, and our families have had, or the neighborhood we live in, lives within. And you're saying that there's a whole new paradigm there that's waiting to be discovered and waiting for us to change how we see the world.
Exactly. Well, how I see it, and even science would say this, everything that we believe to be actual reality is really just a placeholder, so to speak, until we get new information. So everything we're seeing in our world now is basically a placeholder until we get new information. And we're constantly, all this new information is becoming available to us. And as we lift the veil, to use your term, and that's such a great term, because there is this veil over the truth. And once we lift that veil, we find out the world is so much more interesting and benevolent and incredible than we ever imagined. It's just, it's just amazing what ends up happening and what could be possible for people when they let go of these, we cement in these ideas like this is the way it is, and then that's all we'll ever see. But once you open up that there could be other things possible, then all kinds of things become possible.
And how do you see people doing that, Pam? I know, like, you lay stuff down in E Squared and E Cubed, for example, and in your latest work. But what's the framework? I mean, I know sometimes it appears like a crisis in some people's world. Like you said, sometimes getting fired, some people look at the negative side of things, and you go flip what you're seeing now to the possibility side. And because the door is forced closed on you, other ones will be opened. But how can people get into that mindset?
The book that I wrote after E-Cubed is called Thankengur, which is about gratitude. And in there, I've got like 30 different party games is what I call them. But because part of it is that when you start looking at life as more like you're playing with these principles instead of working at these principles. I mean, that's just like a little tiny tweak, but it makes a big difference. But anyway, what I say in there is when something, what we previously, consider to be a problem, let's say, for example, if you get fired from your job. So what I suggest people do is if something like that happens, something that we would typically view as negative, I say, put it on hold for 3 days because, as soon as something we call bad, and I'm using air quotes here, but as soon as something bad happens, we call all our friends and we go, oh my gosh, you'll never believe what happened. And we immediately go into this panic mode. And what we do is we call forth those forces of, oh my gosh, things are terrible. So what I say to people, I said, go ahead, give yourself permission that in 3 days you have every single right to panic. At that point, feel free to panic, join every listserv, read every book you can about how to fix this problem. But in the meantime, for 3 days, open up to what could be possible. So for example, if you lose your job, it is possible now that A, you could find a job that pays a whole lot more. B, you could get a job that's a whole lot more convenient and easy to where you live. So all kinds of things could happen if you don't go into that problem mode, like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. And I was telling you about the stories that I get. I remember this one girl, wrote to me and she had just gotten fired from her job. And then, and I said, oh, congratulations, that's so great. And then about 9 months later, she wrote me this incredible email about how her entire life had changed and she'd started her own business and all these things had happened to her. And she was, really flying high. And so from that thing that looked like it was a bad event ended up being this really great thing for her. I mean, Louise Hay, who was the publisher, she just, made her transition this year, but she actually started her entire publishing company, Hay House, which publishes my book, after she got cancer. And I mean, it's like cancer. How could that be a good thing to happen to you? But it led her into investigating in like the mind-body connection. She ended up curing herself of cancer. She ended up, writing these books and then, of course, going on to start her own publishing company. So, I like to talk about problems kind of like a pointillist painting. When you're right up in front of a pointless painting, all you see are dots. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's just a bunch of dots. But as you step back and you look at the picture of your life, from a bigger vantage point, you realize it's this gorgeous, amazing picture. And so I think what happens when we brand something, we label something problem state or something really bad's happening, then all we're doing is seeing, the dots with our nose right up against that pointless painting. But as we step back and open up to the possibilities, then, anything could happen.
Do you want to get that out?
Oh, no. That's okay. That's all right.
Okay.
That's my other phone. Sorry about that.
No worries at all. I was thinking when you were saying that about, let's flip into Art and Soul Reloaded now. From a creativity point of view, right? So sometimes these, you mentioned Louise Hay, sometimes these crisis points happen and they force the veil to be lifted. And as you said, sometimes we ask and we don't realize that we're getting all these hints. Maybe that sick feeling in your stomach going to work every day is a hint that you're not enjoying it. You need to change. You need to do something about it. Instead, what we do is we drown it with red wine every night and we just suppress what our bodies and our minds are trying to tell us all the time. What's your advice around that? Because there's so many people unhappy in their jobs.
I think that because we are all meant to be creative, like I feel like we are made in the image and the likeness of the great creator, call it what you want, but that's what we're here to be creative. And I think sometimes when we get into these meaningless jobs, they're just kind of rote over and over and over again, we're not being who we're meant to be. And who we are meant to be is to be creators. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're all meant to be artists or writers, but we're all meant to create some vision. We are here to expand the universe. As we know, like ever since the Big Bang happened, the universe has just been expanding and expanding. And we are a really important force in the expansion of the universe. And so when we get stuck in problem state, and when we get stuck in this idea that we're, just going to a job and following somebody else's plan for our lives, we may not be doing our part to really expand the universe. I mean, there's no judgment in that or like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. It's just that there's so much more possible. So I don't know. I mean, I think for people that feel like they're stuck in a job that they don't like, I mean, that's really the universe kind of giving you some intel, some pretty important intel. And I think what happens is a lot of people don't listen to that. We're not really trained to listen to that. I mean, for an example, like, okay, as soon as your kid gets sick, for example, you rush them to the doctor. But if instead we would say to our child, your body has the ability to heal itself. Inside of you is this healing force, but we don't tell our kids that. We give them the message that somebody else has the answer, somebody else besides them. So this universe that's wanting to stream all this information, all this healing, all these blessings is being thwarted because we are taught that we need to follow in line with this step of what we're supposed to do. I mean, who made up this thing of what we're supposed to do? So anyway, I mean, to get back to Art and Soul Reloaded is really about creativity and how each of us is meant to be creative. And that is our destiny. That is, we're all, meant to, follow our imaginations. And in fact, by using our imaginations, we can create a whole different world. And I think, a lot of people would probably agree with me that right now, the reality, the placeholder that we've got going on right now could probably use an upgrade. So, one of my big goals or missions in life is to change the dominant paradigm and to get people doing more what they are meant to do, which is expand the universe and be creative and use their imagination.
Yeah, and thinking about what you said there about imagination and also children. So you mentioned about encouraging your children to cure themselves and not even cure themselves, but even be open to the possibility of that, not the problem of them being sick. I talked to so many leading people in their industries and their fields on this show, and I always ask the question about our education system, because in a way, children come into this world full of creativity, full of their natural state, and then we impose that veil again, that paradigm on them and kind of go, oh, this is the way it is. And when you're sick, you go to the doctor and you get medication, you get a prescription, and then you take them and then you get better. And in the school system though, Pam, what is your view on that? And what are we doing wrong and what can we do in the future?
Because of this book, I've been asked to do workshops, and it wasn't something I'd necessarily done before. But what I often call my workshops, for one thing, I call them play shops, but I call it reverse finishing school. I mean, remember that old term, finishing school? You go and you learn the right manners and you learn, which fork to use and, all that kind of stuff that we teach our kids. I mean, our kids already know everything. In fact, if you haven't read EQ'd, I'm going to share this story, and this is one of my very favorite stories. So it's about this 5-year-old boy, and his parents bring home a new baby. And he just keeps bugging his parents. He wants some alone time with his baby sister. And his parents, they're worried about sibling rivalry, and they're thinking, why does he want this alone time? Why does he want to be alone with his baby sister? Is he going to smother her? Is he, jealous? I mean, what's going on? But he would not let this go. So finally, the parents said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you have your alone time with with your new baby sister, who's, laying in her little bassinet. So the parents, let him go up there, and they're peeking around the corner. And so, the little boy, walks up, he tiptoes up to the bassinet, and he looks in and he goes, "Tell me about God. I'm starting to forget." And I think that story says it all, because, we are born with this great imagination, this great zest for life. I mean, all these things that we want to do, but we are little by little chip away, learn to follow the rules. And then before, we know it, life's nothing but just a rote, resuscitation of all these rules that we were taught. So a lot of my new book is about getting more in that playful state, because, Einstein said, when you're playful, that's when amazing things happen. I mean, he's the one that invented, that came up with the, E equals MC squared. I mean, so being in a playful state, and again, being in an imaginative, creative state, that's when all kinds of miracles start coming to you. So, going back, in fact, I always say to parents, I have a daughter. I didn't always do this, but I did it to a certain degree. Someone gave me the advice. They said, instead of you trying to get her to hurry up and do, what you need to do, like hurry up, put your shoes on, get your coat on, all that stuff. Go slow down to her speed, because a little kid, they're out there, they're looking at that ladybug and counting how many spots are on there, and they're watching the sun come up. They are seeing everything. They're imagining anything. I mean, if you really want to, improve your life, just follow your kids. So I think instead of we parents training our children, we should really follow their lead, because they know, everybody's their friend and they love everybody. And, it really is a much better world if kids kind of, if we followed their lead instead of, doing what we're trying to train them to do.
And that training, when you think of us as parents and we see a child coming out with an audacious statement that I'm going to do X or Y or whatever it is, our immediate reaction is one of protection and kind of going, I don't want them to be hurt and I don't want the world to think a certain way of them. I think it's one of the great tragedies, and I'm guilty of it myself, where sometimes you kind of go, I don't want them going out and doing that because what will people think, and you're going against everything that we should allow them to do. Even if they fail, they'll learn from those failures.
Okay, for my child, I always said I would much rather she failed at doing what she loved than to not get to do what she loved. So I have been really good. She's now 24, and I was pretty good. I still would take her to the doctor. I wasn't fully, able to do some of the things that I now believe in, but I did really let her become her own person. And, and to exercise her creativity. And so we kind of stayed away from a lot of, TV and that sort of thing.
We're coming into New Year, and, it's one of the reasons I was so happy we could connect before the New Year started, because I just feel E squared, E cubed, and Art and Soul Reloaded, because it's a year-long experiment, this one, and it does launch people into a world of creativity. And innovation for me is evolution, it's creativity, it's changing paradigms. It's not about a new product or a new business model. And I feel your work, it's like an operating system to get there, to get to new ideas and new way of living. And I'd love if we could touch a little bit on Art and Soul Reloaded and maybe talk about some of the mindsets and some of the experiments that you talk about in that book.
Okay, so they're not necessarily experiments, but what I do is there's a couple different things in there. Each week, and there's 52 weeks literally in Art and Soul Reloaded. So it's like kind of I call it apprenticeship, to find your bold, daring, audacious side. But so I give people these little assignments, like little things so they're all creativity assignments. So I call it Just Do It. Because I think a lot of thing that stops people is they think about it too much. So just do it is really important. That's that Nike slogan. Because if we think about anything, we'll talk ourselves out of doing it. So just do it and just try these different things. Don't put any judgments on it. So the book has 52 essays about the importance of being creative, about letting go of your judgments about yourself. And I talk, about some of the things I had to let go of to be a creator, and some of the things that all creators. Oh, and I have a section there called You're in Good Company, because every person that you look up to and go, oh, wow, what a great artist or a great inventor or a great entrepreneur, every one of them had their own doubts, and to the point where they still have their own doubts, but they do it anyway. Again, they just do it. So each week has, this essay, and then each week has a fun activity to do. And so it's called Just Do It. And then I have what I call Zumba for the soul. And it's 3 other little fun things you can do. And again, I'm all about fun and play. I think that's so important. And I think most adults have forgotten how to have fun. They literally don't know how to have fun. They're so busy following those rules we were talking about earlier. Life is this great, exciting adventure. One of my favorite quotes is from Kurt Vonnegut, who says, "We're here on earth to fart around. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise." So anyway, I love that quote from Kurt Vonnegut. So that's what that book is about. It's literally an apprenticeship for a year, and it's about just being bold and daring and audacious and trying different things. And I give people these little assignments. I mean, it's everything from, come up with the title to your memoir, to making a carpool karaoke. One of the practices I have in there every single day, I encourage people to write down 3 ideas every day. And what happens when we start coming up with ideas? Just make it a religious practice. Like, I'm going to do 3 ideas a day. Just jot them down. It can be anything. It can be stupid. The biggest thing you got to do is let go of your judgments about yourself and this belief that, oh, it's not good enough, or I shouldn't say that, or I can't write that one down. No, I mean, as you start allowing yourself to brainstorm and allowing yourself to let your mind run amok, that's when really brilliant things start happening. So it just kind of gets your muscle going, your idea muscle working. Because what happened, and most of us, our imagination has totally atrophied. It doesn't even work anymore. And to think about it, if you're getting out of bed after, say you had, some surgery and you laid in bed for 2 weeks, you literally need physical therapy to get up and move again, because that's what happens when you don't use your body. And so most of us, our imagination has gone into atrophy. So I suggest the, 3 ideas a day, because it just kind of gets you activated back into that thing where your imagination can pour forth. So anyway, that's one of the key things that I suggest for people to do. But then it does have all these fun little exercises or projects, whatever you want to call it, for people to do too.
Just to get back to a bit of science behind it, because you talked about, we can think about the paradigm shifts. So these are little ways of changing gradually. It's like going to the mind gym, isn't it? You take it step by step, and this is what you do across the year. It's a 52-week program of your mental gym. On a different level, then, we talk about quantum physics, for example. This is what I love in your work. You don't get too deep on that, but you can. And if you would now, I'd love you to give us a little primer, in your words, of quantum physics and the world, the paradigm shifts that are possible.
Okay, so we believe that the world is solid, right? I mean, we think, like, I'm sitting at a table right now and it feels like it's solid. It looks like it's solid. Well, it really isn't. It's actually vibrating molecules. I mean, that's what, they have discovered is the truth. And so what happens is, once you start believing things are a certain way, then it literally makes a hologram, and it limits you to that thing. It's like you literally cement in that particular reality. But if you could really see, again, pulling back the veil, you realize that the world is this vibrating frequency of energy everywhere. Everywhere you look is energy. I mean, even in what looks like air with space, it's vibrating energy. So what happens is, the observer affects their reality. So you start looking at the world a certain way. They call it the observer effect in quantum physics. And so, there's that famous experiment. If the scientists that expected to see waves in this particular thing, they saw waves. Those that expected to see matter saw matter. So it literally is what's coming from your brain. What the observer is expecting is what they end up seeing. And most of us have, made this placeholder of how we think reality is. But when you become open to this, other possibilities, and you start letting go of all those really cemented in beliefs that you have, then you start, things kind of loosen up a little bit. That's when more possibilities are available to you. It's like it goes from being that really solid state, and this is the way the world is, to, wow, maybe the world is this way instead. I mean, I talk a lot about, these higher forces that in E squared, I call it the field of infinite potentiality. In art and soul related, I call it the muses. But it's really this field. It's this thing that, Einstein talked about, this bigger thing that is available to us, that wants to continually expand, continually create, and we have access to it. In fact, we are its drivers. And it's like it's bigger than we can even put our minds around. We have decided the way the world is, and as long as we believe it's that way, we will continue to see that day after day. So as we open up and just let go a little bit, just try a few new ideas, a few new things, and then it gets easier and easier for that to come about.
And is this why then, Pam, ideas like journaling and like visualization and visual boards become so important? Because you start seeing a different reality, or desired reality. And in the way you've brilliantly described quantum physics there, if you're doing that and everything's energy, and you start seeing things as you want them to see, they'll start verging towards that reality.
Right. So start being what you want to be. We think, oh, I'm not that. Well, okay, let's say, just to use one example, let's say you want to have more money. Start being a wealthy person. I mean, what is a wealthy person? Start being that. If you want to be a more loving parent, what does a loving parent do? Start being that. It may not be, the reality that you're seeing now, but again, that's just a placeholder. That's that cemented in, hard hologram, that solid hologram that we're looking at, but it can be brought back to be vibrating to where a new possibility can come in any real way. It's like so out there what is really the truth about the way the world actually works. It's so much bigger than anything we can imagine. It's hard to even get our heads around it. But that's why the more we open up, the more, these new things can come in.
Finally then, Pam, coming into the new year, what would be your one wish for people to take into the new year? Some simple steps they could take to change their view.
I'm a big believer in gratitude, in being grateful, and trying to see the gift in everything. Like we talked, earlier about some of the negative things that we look at. Maybe there's a gift in it. To really start looking at gratitude, I've got a little practice, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about this. I often talk about my little AA 2.0 program, and so I can share that with your listeners. There's the AA program, the 12-step program. I'm all about smooth and easy. So my little AA 2.0 is a 2-step program. And this is what I suggest people do. Every day I get up and I say something, this is step number 1, something really amazingly awesome is going to happen to me today. I start my day with this intention that something really cool is going to happen. And then the second step of this little AA 2.0 is I have 5 friends. I call them my possibility posse, and I text them blessings from the day before. And the one rule about this, everybody's like, oh, gratitude, it's a great thing. But now with this program, every day you have to write down 3 new blessings, something new that happens. So I feel like I'm like this explorer out there, and I'm looking for these blessings. I'm waiting to see these blessings. And so it's a whole different mindset. And then again, it opens up that, back to that vibratory matter to where the cool things can start forming. So gratitude, to me, it's the tonic, it's the everything that changes our world.
And you mentioned just neurologically as well, that your brain, when you do that, it's almost like your brain becomes a private investigator and starts looking for ways to make that reality happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And I talk a lot about it. Some of my future books, then E Squared, a lot about physiology, like even doing silly things like dance to the bathroom in the morning. I mean, everybody has to get out of their bed and go to the bathroom, to brush their teeth, whatever. But how about dancing there, singing in the shower, doing even little creative acts like that? It just kind of shakes things up a little bit. So, that's some of the real simple things. It's like people don't even have to like radically change their life. But when you make those little steps like that, it does radically change your life. Eventually, if you're open to that, if you, start approaching things with a little bit more fun, playful attitude.
Brilliant, Pam. Well, we really appreciate your time on the show. Pam Grout, author of E Squared, E Cubed, Think and Grow Rich, Art and Soul Reloaded, Jumpstart Your Metabolism, Living Big, and many, many other books I'll link to in the show notes. Pam, absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.